Restoring the Culture is hosted by Tanya Taylor Rubenstein, story mentor, and Camille Adair, family constellation facilitator. In this podcast, these long-term friends explore how stories serve our lives. Their inquiry meanders into the realms of science, theater, health, and consciousness, moving the individual and global narratives forward as they draw upon their relationship as the laboratory for their experiments in truth. So many of us feel isolated and alone in our deepest longings. Each one of us is necessary in rediscovering the truth of our human story and listening to what is calling us forward so that we can restore the culture together.
Hey everyone, welcome to Restoring the Culture. I'm here with Tanya and looking forward to a conversation on voice or voicelessness, voice of the voiceless, and where we're both at with that. And today, instead of reading a quote, we're going to communicate in a different way. And so if you'll just take a moment with us, we'll do this honoring and of sound, and then we'll come back to the podcast. All right, well, we're not musicians.
That's for damn sure.
I was reading about how words began as sounds. And so words used to sound like what they meant. So I was trying to think of words that sounded like what they meant when they were still could inhabit, the right hemisphere of the brain of feeling, right? And I was thinking of the word cushion. I mean, that sounds like what it is. Cushion. You can feel the khush. But so many words have become just words to describe something, right? So they're becoming more objective and less subjective. And that's part of us becoming less relational or less embodied, less in touch with our sensations. And that leads me to a conversation that Tanya and I just started having, and we're really both sensitive to the changes in the field, and my field, your field, the collective field. And when we started this podcast at the beginning of COVID, our commitment really was to have honest, transparent conversations between us as friends and to make those public. As an experiment. Yes. Is this going to serve? But how refreshing to be able to have conversations like that have meaning to us instead of thinking, oh, we're going to have a conversation about a topic because we think it's going to have meaning to other people. And then we manufacture our thoughts based on what we think the outer world wants, right? This was more about how do we share our inner world instead of manufacturing ourselves. We just share ourselves. And so
that's right.
One of the things that's starting to shift and change for me is that I feel like I'm being called to this going in more internal and into a time of these sounds, these feelings, and those don't always translate into conversations in the same way. And so for the last couple days, I've just keep having this feeling about not backing out altogether of this podcast because I want to support it, but how can I, in terms of the sisterhood, support this mission, support our friendship, support these messages and then we started talking about it, and you said after Stephen died, after 19 years, you have your voice back. And after a 19-year stretch for me, which we had never done the math on, I'm going internal, and I feel sort of mute in a good way. Like I'm communicating in different ways and something is gestating inside of me. So one of our conversations that we're actually making public because we haven't worked all this out together, but we wanted to share it with you in the spirit of how and why we came together in this podcast is that I may take a step into the quiet underworld and I might inhabit more of the voice of the voiceless. And while Tanya's getting her voice, maybe inviting some other people to come in as guests.
Some other guests that we've wanted to have diverse voices in here. And
That's
it's
exactly
an opportunity.
right.
Like, it doesn't have to be you and me and a third voice. It can be me and another voice until things shift and perhaps shift again, right?
Exactly. We don't know. But it's like this is part of that thing of listening to what's moving and what's wanting to happen next. And I think it's this thing of being with the unknown that's such a powerful guide. I mean, it really is the next phase of leadership. I think it's barely emerging. It's emerging somewhat in us. And I think this is really what we've been leaning into for a long time. And I think it's actually like it's growing in us now, right? This is leadership, to listen. It is leadership to stand in the unknown and to actually not have the answers, but to be guided by what's happening within and around us.
And to speak it to each other fearlessly.
That's right.
Because people are so afraid of truth. And certainly back in our own history, yours and mine, right? We've had times when we needed to have boundaries with each other or change something and we wanted to please each other. Or, I mean, not just with you and I, of course, in our own lives, like this is what we've been conditioned to do. The people pleasing versus, oh, I didn't plan on this, but life wants me to go someplace slightly different now, or I'm being called to do this in service to my own soul, and it doesn't quite make sense in the outer world, right?
Right. Mine doesn't make sense in the outer world at all. And I really am so grateful that you hear me and that you understand it for what it is, and that it isn't another story. It is this story. And that it's just as valid for me not to speak as it is for you to speak.
Exactly. No,
I mean,
totally.
Right. I mean, it's like the truth is
Completely.
the truth. And how we give voice to that truth, whether, I did a checkout today in my constellation training, and I had us check in with a sound and check out with a word or a sound. And I found myself humming a lullaby. And it took me to such a deep place to look at all these faces of these people I care so much about on my screen in my class and to be humming this lullaby and to have that be my way that I exit. I think we're so much needing to connect in these deeper ways right now. Right. And I feel like I'm going into some underground preparatory school for something. I don't know what it is.
Completely. I mean, and I see that. I see it in myself. I see new ways of being are really springing up. And almost coming from our last conversation on Restoring 2020, it's like we've been stretched around how to connect on screens with people all over the world in an intimate rather than a compromised way. And so when you talk about humming the lullaby, I'm like, we're being called to go deeper with our imagination out to the greater aspects of consciousness, right? And find that we're actually together. We're actually can stay close. Even while all these shifts happen, we can stay close while you're quiet and I'm speaking.
That's right. That's right.
That we can take these different journeys. I think this is what I want to say, because you and I started this podcast and we have worked the edges of restoring our friendship for 21 years now. And our friendship should have been lost many times by conventional or egoic standards, because we've had different ways of being, different ways of acting out or suppressing our own trauma, different things with mother issues and female issues.
Right.
So in restoring our friendship, which is what I feel is the original intent, how can I support you in going quiet without making up a story about abandonment or that I can't do it alone, or that you don't care as much about me. What I'm saying is the myths we put on top of people's soul truth stops us from doing what we need to do, which is always put that soul truth first and create relationships where we're safe to speak them and allow them and be uncomfortable without the split. You and I talk about the split. There's so many reasons that we find from an ego point of view to go into the split, when in reality, if we support each other in following our own souls, what greater possibility of love comes out of that, or even creation in the future that we can't even imagine, right?
I think that's right. And I think that we're doing it. I would say, to answer that question, the one that comes to me that's most obvious as friends is pick up the phone if you're feeling, if any of that starts coming up for you, just pick up the phone and I'll remind you. I would say the other thing is that, in terms of the lineage of this podcast, it started out as a podcast between two friends.
Totally.
And all we do is speak the truth. This podcast started with Camille and Tanya, right? That's the order that we wrote it in. Camille and Tanya with a small c, small t.
That's right.
And now I'm saying, I'm going to gestate for a while.
Yes.
Can you carry Restoring the Culture and invite other people in? And then I just say, I'll be there in spirit. Remember me. Invite me on sometime. Call me and say, I want to do a podcast about this. You may not be on it. Is there anything that you would add to the conversation? I mean, I'd love to stay close to it.
Totally. And that is the restoring process, right?
Right.
The toxic old culture we're moving out of is the one that can't hold different needs at different times.
Well, and then what it does, and as part of the split, is then it puts people into exile, right? You're either in or you're out.
Or pressure.
Right. Those are false dualities.
Totally.
It doesn't have to be in or out. It's just the truth that we started this together. And now I'm going to take some time to go into my voicelessness because something else is growing inside of me that's really important that I listen to. And you are coming into a time where you're going to be talking and having more conversations of restoring the culture with other people that will be in service to restoring the culture. And if we're both in service to restoring the culture, then we know we're in the right place.
There's no problem. Totally.
We're both standing behind restoring the culture as the founders. That will never change. But it doesn't mean you can't take it and carry it. And I trust you to do that. And I'm really grateful that you trust me to go underground for a while and gestate something that can't come into words yet.
Totally.
It's like it will come into words, but I can't speak it until it's ready to be born.
Exactly. No, totally.
And what does that look like for you? I'm curious about that. How it would be restored for you between us.
Well, I think just even a deeper commitment to the divine directives that are coming through. It's very clear to me that right now you and I are both so highly aligned with our intuitive selves and our souls that are guiding us to individual purposes manifested in great service in the world, and right, honoring that is why we're choosing to shift the form, that it's not from any old story. It's from the new story of what does it look like to just radically allow ourselves to change any outer stories to serve the soul, because the soul is guiding. So for me, I think it means just following, like honoring the genesis of this is about our relationship, and that energetically you're still in the field as I wanted to say fairy godmother because I was looking at you with your red lipstick and I thought you looked like a fairy godmother today. Anyway, it's like you're here and present. And so it's honoring that presence of who you are. And I think just trusting the directive what I hear you saying is you're trusting the directive of my soul right now to invite the people I'm most drawn to talking to. And I sort of have this feeling that in the future, it could end up being a vehicle once again for you to invite in some of the people you're most drawn to talking to.
Right.
We can play with what that means.
We can play with it. That's right.
Because now we've so established our voices here and who we are and what we're about. We can play, but for me, the vision is to just keep following the desires of my soul, the dictates of my soul in terms of, and asking other people, bringing in other diverse wisdom from different voices, people of a different gender, people of, maybe who are non-binary with their gender, who knows, people of different backgrounds, different levels of expertise, both inner and outer diversity, right? What is their vision of restoring? Because to me, we're building a new culture that's based on our abilities, many different abilities of others who are also drawn to restoring the culture, who see the big sort of systemic issues and have different gifts to bring to the table, because it's such a big inquiry, right? It started out small, but it's so big.
Interesting, because this is reminding me of, I had a couple different midwives for solace. You were the first midwife in the very beginning of my movie. And then my friend Sylvia was a midwife toward the end of the movie. She helped me create a nonprofit. She really, the last year of that push of editing and getting it ready to move out and to be born, right?
Right.
I had a midwife in the beginning and a midwife at the end. And I was thinking about that, that maybe, in different ways we're midwifing something as part of the story of the podcast of what's happening here. And that's a special place, right? And and midwives don't stick around in the same capacity forever, right?
Right.
They change. And
changes, yes.
And it can be purposeful to be in a place for a time, and that role can change, right? It can evolve and it can change. But yeah, I guess that is sort of the big takeaway for me, is just feeling more comfortable being in the unknown and being willing to go with the change without having to know why. I don't exactly know why, but I'm getting this directive that's pretty loud. And I think it has to do with a new time I'm going into at the same time that you're coming into a new time. It's so fascinating that we hadn't talked about these 19, 20-year cycles before.
No, until today.
Until today, in the right before the last podcast. And we've known each other a little longer than that. So we have the privilege of the entire 19 years. I knew Stephen before he was schizophrenic. You knew me before I got married.
Yes.
It's really interesting, right, that we have known each other through two big chapters,
Huge stories. And it's funny, it's true when you said, I remember, playing that role for you with the film and supporting you and coming to some interviews. And I think helping facilitate the connection with Grant through Adair.
Through Adair, that's exactly right.
Like those things that had to happen.
Right.
And then now, okay, we're getting something new here in this form. And I think it's a great metaphor to use. Oh, and I was going to say that now when I work with people on their books, I say to people, there's an illusion you're going to have one person take you all the way through. But the way I've set it up with my team, I say you really need a story mentor to make sure you've got a story really worth telling. You need a coach, a writing coach who's going to show up every week like the midwife and get you through. Then you're going to need a different person to be that editor, because they've really got to have that literary background and be a professional editor, and then somebody who's going to help you get it published. So here it is. It's like, same thing in a solo show. It's like you need the director and you need the coach, you need the director. There's a whole thing, the people backstage, and that these one person projects, right? That's so of this culture too,
isn't it?
When it's just really this beautiful circle of souls that always comes together that makes anything significant happen, no matter who's the one that's the quote unquote face of the project.
Well, it reminds me of that saying, it takes a village, right? It takes a village to raise a child. I've been thinking about that in terms of, the depth psychology community. It really takes a village to grow, someone in this kind of a container to do this work. It takes years, and it takes more than one person, and it takes time to raise a child. And even when I think about like a friendship or a marriage or a business, we have so many false dualities that say it's going to be one person. There are many ways that we get to love, and there are many ways that we get to prosperity, and there are many ways that we get to feeling fulfilled in friendship, right?
Yes.
It doesn't have to come through one face. And I remember, you and I used to talk about, a couple of years ago, we started talking about the new face of leadership, and we were seeing a sea of faces, right? That is the new face of leadership, is the many. So it's kind of taking me full circle to that metaphor of it takes a village. And when we know it takes a village, our only job is to listen so that we know when and where our right place is in terms of serving the mission as a village person.
Yeah. I love that, as a villager, truly.
That's right.
Again, and that's the thing too about, I'm reading an amazing book right now called Sand Talk on Indigenous leadership. And it's the circle, right? It is the talking circle. It's everybody being honored. It's Indigenous wisdom from every corner of the earth. It's pan-cultural. And it's just making me think how, if we're in right relationship, and we talk about matriarchal circles, there's always, we're just villagers. That's the new leadership. We're villagers, and what's our right place at any given time, and then allowing that to shift. And one thing, can I just share one thing that came up, about American, power? We're grabbers of power, and then we try to hold on to the power. Last night, and this isn't to discredit at all the amazing contributions in the culture of Justice Ginsburg, who died 2 days ago. But she had an opportunity when Obama was in office to retire and have him replace her. And she stayed. And now, there's this whole disruptive thing about, now the wrong side gets to replace her. Well, all of us, and this goes so beyond red and blue, as you and I have talked about, this is about power. And when we hold on to power, and I see this in myself, I understand it. I'm out of my space as a villager. And when I'm also reluctant to step into my power, I may be out of my place as a villager. In the divine sense, right? I see us almost like divine chess pieces, not being manipulated, but rather being led in and out of different roles. In the circle in Western culture is like, hold on to that power forever. It's like it's a power grab, and that's so much about the split in our culture rather than we can share. And also sometimes it's time to mentor younger people into power, other people into power.
Well, that's really where it's at for me. It's whether it's chronological age or it's going to be a new experience for someone, right? That it's something is showing up for them. And I think it really is. I feel like I've been turned inside out. Like I'm going to be somebody's teacher. On some level, I feel like then I share their karma. It's a big deal.
Yes. To
step in to train someone or teach them. This isn't little stuff, right? These are on some level like soul contracts that come in. And it's a big deal if you're really listening and you're really honoring the potential for what can grow inside of that kind of relationship. Not to say that there aren't boundaries and clear beginnings and endings and graduations, because those things are really important. Yes. But I do think that we're just so much more connected than we recognize. And I think somehow maybe we're waking up to more of our connectedness. And that's a beautiful thing, which means we're really here to serve each other. Period. I don't care what the power structure is.
Yeah.
We're here to serve each other. And if we get off that track, we're going to suffer. Period.
Exactly. No, and it feels so important to me to just say, if we're being called to teach or lead in any way, we damn well better have trusted peers and allies, as well as elders ourselves on this side or the other side of the veil.
It's really important
that we turn to regularly to stay in our integrity, because there are so many ways we can take missteps around our power, because that's
right.
how we've been conditioned, frankly.
That's right.
So.
And I think in a way, it takes me back to my hospice days. Like, this is all death and dying work,
Yeah, totally.
I mean, it's like we should all be in a process of succession planning.
Yeah, for sure.
I'll be 55 on my next birthday, but I can't tell you, I'm thinking every day I think about, my own process of succession planning as part of my dying process.
And, that's how have been setting up my new business plan with the woman I've been mentoring for 7 years, like bringing her in closer and bringing her in with other teachers on my team and older people, and also honoring her own wisdom as a millennial. But we're having these conversations, and I'm having these conversations with everyone on my team and even changing the name of my business from Tanya Taylor Rubinstein to Somatic Writing, because I want somatic writing to go on beyond me. So,
right.
And you and I have talked about that with our potential work together, perhaps in the future, if we're not thinking in a systems way that can be in the greater service, we're missing huge opportunities and actually missing our part of real power of being able to lead people into sustainable practices that can deepen and deepen and deepen over time, whether we're here or not.
Mm-hmm. That's exactly right. And then I find when I am in that place, it's such a great relief. Mm-hmm. Like, the seduction tells us there's not going to be enough, so we have to hold on to what's ours and be known. When you let go of that, that's where the relief is. It's like you just want to push other people up. That's really our greatest way of being in service and being known, is to become somebody else's root system. Like, how do we become nourishment for their roots so that these plants keep growing in this human world or in the, the human ocean? It's
totally. I mean, I even see it in my business. I've been trying to play roles that aren't mine, because it's not just my business.
Right.
And it's such a relief when I bring in other people to take that over. And it makes me bigger, not smaller, but noticing, the fear from the ego around delegation, around spending money, around whatever. But really standing behind myself allows for the spaciousness of others.
Mm-hmm. I want to kind of end my part with sharing a little story about succession planning and how surprising it can be, because we don't always see the fruits of our service and our love, right? And when I first started teaching in Nashville, there was a young woman who took 1 year of training from me, and it was before I put the whole program together and knew that my way would be, 3 different levels in order to really serve people. And it was okay, because that was a work in progress. It was evolutionary. But she, so this was 3 years ago. She recently had a baby, who I think now is about 4 months old. And she sent me the most incredible video of her in the shower with her daughter. And she's holding her iPhone up. And while she's making a little video of her baby girl, she's saying all these healing words to her. Like, you are my daughter, I am your mother, I see you, you belong. And the baby literally was like, the look on her face every time this young woman would speak, this baby looked like she was like in this raptured joy. It was just the most incredible thing. And I thought, I never in a million years would have guessed that constellation training would become such an integral part of how this young woman would become a mother. We did constellations while she was pregnant. We did a constellation before she conceived for this baby.
Amazing, Camille.
So I just thought, oh, wow, what is the ripple effect? We don't know. But it's such a testament to staying true to what our calling is. Even if that calling takes us underground for a while, as mine is doing, right?
Oh, yeah. And even if that calling manifests in the world in the last year of our lives.
Exactly.
You know, I had an amazing acting teacher, Bill Hickey, when I was young in New York, and he was just always this sort of outsider character, you know, and oh my God, he was incredible. So he would always talk about every story's a love story. You know, he was that guy I've told you about, you know, and he was like 70 years old, and he was like, it just looked like he was always just going to be this amazing marginal teacher who every now and then got a role, a small character role on or off Broadway. But, you know, and then at like 70 years old, he got put in a film and was nominated for an Oscar. He didn't win, but I remember watching him, you know, he had a shock of gray hair and his bow tie was like askew because he was kind of just one of those, he almost looked like a homeless person, you know, dripping in his tuxedo, like 90 pounds wet. And I cried when I saw him. But then from that opportunity, he worked as an actor constantly in film and movies for the rest of his life. And he never became a household word, but I always thought there he was, like from 70 to 80. And after all those years of being so devoted to his craft and his students and his love of acting and his mastery, bam, you know, there it happened. But even if it hadn't, he would have been on Bank Street, teaching the classes, coming late to class, drinking his whiskey out of his thermos and eating his ho-hos.
He wouldn't have been any less significant as a person and as a contributor.
That's right.
That's right.
So it's like the devotion to our soul's journey. And if we ever waver from it, to just come back. And the deepening is going to take us where we go, no matter what happens in the outside in the world, right? Mm-hmm. You know, you look at great like Van Gogh, who didn't sell a painting in his lifetime, and 100 years later, you walk into the Louvre, he's still present. Why are you laughing? I always make you laugh unexpectedly.
I know it. Well, I'm glad we'll still be laughing together. I may not laugh for a little while on this podcast, but I want to say it's really been an honor and a privilege to be a part of this. And I leave it with you.
I'll take it from you, Camille, and hold you in it. And we'll just say in terms of the outer story, always to be continued,
to be continued.
And to to all our listeners, just know I'll be bringing on some amazing people to continue this restoring inquiry in the meantime.
And I want to just give a special thank you, shout out to Grant Taylor, my dear friend, and the person who's been editing these podcasts for now. And he's a friend of both of ours. And he's another 19, 20-year relationship, you know.
Totally.
Creative partner.
Well, that was what we met him through Adair.
That's exactly right.
20 years ago. So much gratitude to Grant.
I know. Mm-hmm. Yeah. All right. Big love.
Thank you for joining Camille and Tanya for this episode of Restoring the Culture. If you were inspired, we would deeply appreciate it if you would leave a review on iTunes or any other platform where you heard our podcast. For more ongoing inspiration and support, please join our no-cost global Facebook community, Restoring the Culture. You can support our podcast by making a donation here. And remember, we are each restoring the culture as we restory our own lives. See you next time.